Hey everybody, and welcome back to Be Like Christ for another 5-minute Bible study. I am super excited today. I hope you are as well, because we are on the last chapter of Leviticus. We're in Leviticus chapter 27. If you have made it with us through the whole book of Leviticus, congrats to you. Good job persevering. So Leviticus chapter 27, we have a free PDF that you can download on our website, and all the chapters of Leviticus, Genesis, and Exodus are now on there. When I have a chance to go back to the States in June, Lord willing, I will be able to kind of put the final touches on the books, and so they should be available probably about late June, where you get the books with all of the outlines and all this information. So keep an eye out for that. I'm looking forward to getting some of those out. So now let's talk about the last chapter of Leviticus. When did these events happen? As with every other chapter in this book, we are in approximately 1490 BC, 1 year after the Israelites left Egypt. Moses has been having a conversation, or several conversations, with God on Mount Sinai, and God's been giving Moses some laws that he wants the children of Israel to live by. Just got one term to define in this chapter, and it's the term shekel. You'll see this term come up throughout the Bible. A shekel is a weight measurement used for money, typically, and it was equivalent to approximately 0.4 ounces or 11 grams, so relatively small. And we're told that 20 gerahs were equal to 1 shekel. You might think that Leviticus closes with, kind of a climactic chapter, a chapter summarizing the rest of the book, but no, it doesn't. In totally Leviticus fashion, it just concludes by giving us more instructions and more laws that the Israelites were supposed to follow. So in our first section of this chapter, verses 1 through 8, we're going to talk about the value of persons who were dedicated to the Lord with a vow. Okay, so the Israelites had the ability to symbolically dedicate other people to the Lord through a payment of money. And the amount of money depended on the gender and the age of the person being dedicated. Yes, gender is real. A man between the age of 20 and 60 was valued at 50 shekels of silver. So if you made a vow dedicating, your brother to the Lord, and your brother is 25 years old, then to symbolically dedicate him, you have to pay, in this case, 50 shekels of silver. Okay, so that was a male between the ages of 20 and 60. Now, for a woman of the same age, you only had to pay 30 shekels, so your sister is going to be cheaper. A male between the ages of 5 and 20 could be dedicated for 20 shekels, and then a female between the ages of 5 and 20 dedicated for 10 shekels. A male between 1 month and 5 years, so a baby to a toddler basically, could be dedicated for just 5 shekels. And then a female of the same age, just 3 shekels. And then finally, up in the elderly years, a male or female that exceeded the age of 60 was valued at 15 shekels and 10 shekels, respectively. And then provisions were also made for poorer people who couldn't afford those values. You could also make a vow and dedicate an animal of yours to the Lord. And that's what we're going to talk about in verses 9 through 13, dedicating animals to the Lord with a vow. If a man made a vow and dedicated an animal to God, then he had to fulfill that vow. He was not allowed to substitute the animal after the vow was made. So he couldn't say, Lord, I'll give you my best, healthiest sheep. And then when it came time to make the sacrifice, he'd be like, oh, actually, I'm going to change it out, and I'm going to give you that old sickly sheep that's been laying in my barn for 3 days. You couldn't do that. If the animal was unclean, so if it was an animal that couldn't be sacrificed in the tabernacle, it had to be brought to the priests for an evaluation, and the priests would state how much that animal was worth, and then the person who made the vow would give money rather than sacrificing the animal. We're told in verses 14 through 24 that a person could also dedicate his land to the Lord with a vow. So houses and land could be dedicated to God as well. If a man dedicated his land that belonged to him, then that land would be given to the priests in the year of Jubilee. So you remember, the year of Jubilee, typically everybody got their land back, and it was given back to the families who originally received it when the Canaanites entered Israel. But if you dedicated that land to the Lord, then it was given to the priests forever, and it no longer returned to your family. Now, if a man dedicated a piece of land that he purchased from another Israelite, then in the year of Jubilee, that land returned to the original owner. So you couldn't buy your neighbor's land and dedicate it to the Lord and give it away, and so he never received it back, right? You can't do that. And then finally, the last section of Leviticus through verse 34, it's just a general section reminding the Israelites to render to God the things that are God's, to use Jesus' words in the New Testament. When the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, they were not to neglect giving God the things that belong to him. The firstborn of all animals and tithes, or portions of produce and of livestock, were to be given to God regularly, and they were not to neglect these things. And then the final verse of Leviticus tells us that all these commands were given to Moses when God spoke to him on Mount Sinai. So that is Leviticus chapter 27, and that is the book of Leviticus. And I just have a simple application to close us off today. Taking oaths and making promises shouldn't be taken lightly. Jesus actually had something to say about this in the New Testament. He instructed his disciples to be trustworthy and to keep their word. Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, Jesus says, let what you say, sorry, I was trying to quote the King James, it's forever stuck in my mind. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So God always keeps his word to us, right? He kept it to the Israelites. He always keeps his promises to us. And so if we want to reflect him and show him to the people who we meet, we need to be as trustworthy as him, at least to the best of our ability. So thanks everybody for tagging along with us through the book of Leviticus, and we will start the book of Deuteronomy, Lord willing, tomorrow, right? Yeah, Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Maybe I shouldn't be teaching the Bible. Okay, all right. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for the book of Numbers.